We are so honored to have Dr. Aimee with us today. She's the founder of I Was Supposed to Have a Baby, which is a supportive space on Instagram and beyond for anyone in the Jewish community struggling to have a baby and build their family. We discuss the physical and emotional journey one may encounter going through infertility and loss. We discuss how to communicate together with your partner and find support along the way. We discuss how friends and family who may not understand or experience infertility can support those going through it, and so much more. So we hope you enjoy this conversation, learn something from it, and probably find a voice that you can feel some kind of connection to. We love Aimee and love her account, I Was Supposed to Have a Baby, and again, are so grateful for her sharing her story and her insights. Well, so thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you in advance for being so willing to share your thoughts, your journey, just your support as far as suggestions, answers to questions you frequently receive. We're really honored to have you here. And we know that what you're doing is so meaningful and so supportive to so many in this worst club with the best members that infertility is. And so to start, I would just love to get an introduction. Tell us about yourself, a bit about your pregnancy and your family building journey.
Sure, Rebecca, thank you so much. Look, your work and GoStork is really life-changing for so many. And so I'm honored to help out in any way I can by sharing bits and pieces of my story and my work. So thank you for the honor.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you. My journey is basically one of secondary infertility and recurrent pregnancy loss. We thankfully were able to get pregnant pretty quickly with my first, but then when we were trying to have our second, we had 3.5 years of secondary infertility, unexplained secondary infertility. We did lots of testing. We did IUIs, first with Clomid, then with injectables. In the midst of those years, we had one miscarriage with a blighted ovum. And then thankfully, on a cycle that was sort of an off cycle, where I ended up with a cyst from one of the injectable medicines that I was taking, on a natural cycle with an IUI, we got pregnant. So it's not clear whether it was just, my husband and I, in the bedroom, or whether it was with the IUI, but either way, thankfully we had our son. And from that period onward, unexplained secondary infertility, not my problem anymore. As sort of quickly as it came, it left. And our intention was to try to have, 4 or 5 kids, maybe 6 kids. Like that was sort of we're modern Orthodox, and that's sort of the norm for individuals in our community. So I nursed my son for a year. Thankfully, we got pregnant again and had my daughter 21 months after he was born, and then nursed her for a year, and then got pregnant again. And that pregnancy just inexplicably ended at 16 weeks, where I walked into the doctor's office. Everything was fine. I had no cramping, no bleeding. My testing that was, I think it was like 11 or 12 weeks, all had come back normal, and there was no heartbeat. And that exact scenario happened 3 other times in a row over the span of about 3-ish years. And so I would get pregnant, thankfully, without any issues, without any intervention, carry the baby till around 16 or 17 weeks, have no inkling that anything was wrong, and then walk into the doctor's office and there was no heartbeat. Each of those pregnancies, each of those babies were all genetically normal, and we just never got any answers. We traveled here, there, and everywhere trying to get answers, and never found any. There were a lot of theories, but we, obviously we're just totally bereft. And I said to my husband, like, it's been, 4 pregnancies. We have 3 children at home. Like, I don't know that I can really do this again. We really just need to take a break because I'm a mess physically. I'm a mess emotionally, hormonally. Like I was just totally all over the place. And I was like, I can't. And we took a long time off and just like, at some point, I think I even said like, I'm done. Like I can't begin to even fathom doing this again. And there came a point, I don't know, a year later, more than a year later, I don't remember exactly how long it was, but I kind of turned to my husband at one point and I said to him, like, look, like, we've gone all over trying to get answers to this, medical mystery that we have. And we didn't get any answers, but there were, a number of hypotheses. And there were also those, alternative medicine thoughts of, stand on your head every second Tuesday and, go gluten-free and, do things that, we now know that there are definitely some basis in science for some of them, but definitely there was no basis in science for many of them. But I just felt like I said to him, I'm like, I think we just need to do this one more time. And I need to know that I've done everything in my power, whatever that means, that we've left no stone unturned, that whatever we could do financially, whatever we could do that made sense logically, whatever we could do that made sense to me scientifically or didn't make sense, but that wasn't dangerous. I said, I feel like I'm not going to be whole unless I try. And so we made the decision to try one more time. And I have twins who are actually turning 8 shortly. So that is my, my miracle story of I have no idea why that pregnancy lasted and went beyond, the 16 or 17 week mark. Both of those, I was, 39 at the time. I dropped 2 eggs. I mean, I didn't know it, but they were both healthy. I had 4 other healthy pregnancies beforehand. We just have no idea. But that experience really, obviously, anyone who goes through any kind of experience like this in the infertility and loss realm, it changes you. And I, as a pediatrician, I thought that after the twins were born and after I had spent time, raising them in the beginning, I thought I was just going to go back to work. And what really ended up happening was that I felt this need to try to help people and make a difference in the lives of families, singles and families that were going through this struggle and this journey, knowing that from personal experience and from my professional experience and sort of sitting on both sides of the table and understanding a lot of the different pieces that, a regular layperson would not, I felt that I had a unique place and unique offering for people in order to be able to give them support. And so I did that. I worked for another organization, Jewish support organization, specifically for pregnancy and infant loss for 3 years, and then left there to start I Was Supposed to Have a Baby.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm so sorry about what you've been through, but you have this beautiful family of 5 and you've created such an incredible and inspiring community based on your experience, which we can't wait to really dig into and learn a lot more about and share with, others just beginning their family building journey. So before we get to that, I wanted to touch on something you did mention. I would love to touch on, just the expectations in the Jewish community as related to family building and how going through this, experiencing infertility can almost be more difficult or harder to talk about in your experience and in others who follow you and come to you for help.
Sure. Look, I think that, specifically the religious Jewish community, but I would say, frankly, many other religions, and specifically those who are sort of more, I don't want to use fundamentalist, but I'm going to say religious. Those who are more, who tend to practice and keep more strictly to the laws of its religion. I know in Christianity and in Islam, like there are also similar tenets. The concept of family building, of this like be fruitful and multiply, this, you know, large families, is one that is taken very seriously and is a real value in the community, in our community specifically. And so, you know, depending on where you fall on the spectrum, even in the religious Jewish world, you know, there are families that are where it's common for there to be anywhere from 7 to 15 or more children in a family. And then there are others where it's more common, sort of in the community that I live, the common numbers are 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so it's unusual. Well, you know, in my community, it would be unusual for someone to have 1 or 2. It would be even more unusual in other communities to have 1 or 2. And having only 3, 4, 5, and 6 would also be unusual in some communities. So I think that, you know, because there's a lot of this external pressure where you're seeing your friends and your family members popping out baby after baby after baby, it's not only coming from a communal level, it's also coming from a personal level where you're watching, you know, people who are deeply important in your life have what you so desire, or what you think is supposed to be normal. And so it's not only what you want, but there's the jealousy factor, and there's the people looking askance at you and your family size of like, oh, what's wrong? Oh, there must be something wrong. Oh, and so there are lots of assumptions, and, you know, which we don't have to get into right now, but the family size is definitely a very big deal in my community and these types of communities.
And so can you just generally shed light on that, what that emotional journey can feel like, or what, you know, I know you talk to so many of your followers and those that come to you for support. Just what can one expect to encounter if they're just starting this journey, like how to get through it and what to expect it might feel like for themselves and for their partner, you know, how to set yourself up also to get through it together and continue to support each other.
Right. So I think that for the people who are going through it, I think the piece that's most helpful, that people find to be most helpful, is the notion of trying not to compare yourself to anyone else, and also not calculating age gaps in your head every time you see someone, or when you start a new cycle. So I know for myself constantly, I hear this from so many people, like you walk into a room, let's say it's, you know, you're an event at your synagogue or a bar mitzvah, right? And you walk into the room and you see, you know, 12 people in front of you, this one, and you see all their children with them, and you're immediately going, 1, 2, 3, 4. That one's a lot younger. I wonder what happened there. Okay. And then you see, oh, that one looks like a teenager. And then there's like a 5-year-old. Oh, they have 12. Oh, like we all internally do this. We calculate age gaps in our head. Or the other piece of the calculating age gaps is, if you're struggling with infertility or loss, you're constantly feeling like you're behind the A game, right? Where everyone else is sort of moving on. Everyone else is on their first, second, third, 12th kid, and you're only on this. So you constantly are calculating in your head this, okay, well, if I get pregnant now, then that means in 9 months I'll have a baby. And so then I'll only be this number of months or this number of years behind. I mean, like, it's this constant calculation. So I think
help you at all.
It doesn't help anyone ever. But it's hard to say to people, don't do it. Cause I think we just all do it naturally. Like you can't say like, well, just forget about that. Like it's not really possible or realistic. I think the more realistic, you know, I'm like using the word again, but the more practical option is to just try to focus on what you are, where you're holding, And to like, there's this concept of, it's, I think it comes from one of the Proverbs. It's like to be happy with what you have, right? Like, I think a lot of infertility and loss is not only thinking about the things that you don't have yourself, but it's also the comparing of what you have versus what other people have. And so it's hard to be happy with what you have when you're constantly looking at others. This is a very hard concept, and people work on this for years to try to figure this out and make this happen. But the more you can try to sort of look internally and not look externally, the better it is. And people also who do have age gaps, like even with families, that have large numbers of children, often what they say is that the older take care of the younger. And there's like this beautiful like relationship between like kids who are 5 years older or 10 years older. And so age gaps aren't necessarily a bad thing. It's just hard to reconcile that when you're watching everyone else lead the life that you hoped you would be leading.
It's just hard because if things don't stick to the plan you thought you had in your head, it can be hard to reconcile or come to terms with. But so many people have to change their plan. At some point, you try to be at peace with it and appreciate what you have. I just think that social media is such this interesting dichotomy where it's the comparison. It's just there in your face at all times on social media, which can be dangerous. But then at the same time, if you're part of fertility and, infertility and loss support communities, it can be an experience that truly helps you through it in such a different way than, the rest of social media outside of your journey and the content you're looking for related to fertility to find support and information, And I think that's such a good segue. I would really love to dive into, I was supposed to have a baby. And if you could just tell us about that process, creating this amazing community. Obviously you were inspired to create it from your journey and from what so many go through, especially in your community, but just how it's evolved since and how it's grown into such a large and supportive group. I'd also love to know a little bit about how people use it. I know that some want to remain anonymous, so they come there, maybe even use a different Instagram account than the one that their friends and family are aware of, so they can come and get support and, education and just information and hear from experts. And others probably use it, openly to share what they're going through and get support. So I'd just love to hear, tell us all about it and, what you've created.
Thank you. I'm so grateful that the community has evolved and grown in ways that I dreamed of and in ways that I couldn't have even conceived of. So when I was working for this other organization, I called Nechama Comfort. I was working for Nechama Comfort, which is, I mentioned before, is this Jewish organization specifically that helps with pregnancy loss and infant loss. I kept getting lots of people coming to me, not only for loss, but also just asking different questions about infertility and support and so on and so forth. And I was also running their social media at that point. And I saw this emergence of hundreds, maybe thousands. I mean, now it's certainly thousands, if not tens of thousands, but just like hundreds of accounts of different individuals talking about their own fertility journey, infertility, loss, ectopic pregnancies, gestational carriers, adoption, donor eggs, donor sperm, all these different kinds of stories. And what struck me is that it seemed like there were, in terms of the Jewish community, there was really like one kind of support out there. There was the brick and mortar sort of, individual organizations that were specifically in one or a few different geographic areas that dealt with only infertility or only loss or only one segment of that journey. Some only did support, some only did finances, some mostly did medical referrals, but they were really very much sort of very brick and mortar in terms of you had to be in a geographic area or you had to be matched up in that geographic area. It felt like it was very much boxed in, that people only could access the things that they were, locally available to them.
A bit siloed, right?
Correct. And also, like, as we know with so many on this journey, that people don't fit into neat boxes of dealing with only infertility or only loss. There are so many that deal very much with both and have lots of different complications among their journey, and then end up on one path or another path. And so, like, one organization would deal with this, another organization would deal with that, another organization would deal with that. So I basically
and one person's circumstances can change throughout their journey, even if it's not all at once that they're dealing with everything, but the emotional journey can change. Your aspects of your relationship, you might have to change your plan from IUI to IVF or to donor conception.
Correct.
Some people go through IVF and then go on for another pregnancy to go through surrogacy, and then have a surprise in the future where they're able to carry a child again. And it's just to have to get a different support or resource for every single different component of it is so exhausting and confusing on top of everything you're already going through, right?
Exactly. And so I saw this emergence of support on social media, and I saw the Jewish organizations sort of staying in their lane and doing their thing. And it just struck me that why not create a space on social media where individuals in the Jewish community, anyone in the Jewish community, could come to for any part of their journey and get support there? Why not create a space that people could just access anywhere in the world? That's what social media is, right? It could be anywhere in the world. It could be 3 o'clock in the morning as you're crying in your bed. It could be, in the palm of your hand as you're standing online, at the grocery store. It could be you just got news at your doctor's office and like you're a mess and you've reached one person but like don't know where else to turn and just need to see something or read something or listen to something. There is a power. People always talk about the terribleness and the, all of the different, the extraneous and the, I'm losing my words, the superficiality of social media. But what social media can do and has done in this realm is provide an entire community of support from all over the world. And so I really view it, and I viewed it then, as very much the great equalizer. You have a phone, you have an app, you have support. You don't need to pay any money. You don't need to go anywhere. You just have support. And so that was the initial dream or thought in my head. And what's come out of it is everything that I wanted and more. It's thankfully been able to reach thousands of individuals, both who are, in marriages, individuals who are single, individuals who are not in this situation at all, but really want to learn more about what this is like and how to help and how to be supportive. And so there's a whole educational aspect to it, which I didn't initially conceive of, so to speak, but it naturally became a part and parcel of this. And the other piece of it is that in the meantime, all of the other Jewish communities recognize that social media, all the other Jewish fertility organizations recognize that social media is a place where they could reach more people and help more people. And so what I was supposed to have a baby has also done, as it's also become a place where we share information and we talk about all the other different Jewish fertility organizations so that people can get the help they need if they do need the help on the ground as well. That it's not just support in the palm of your hand, but we all collaboratively work together I think that was like double speak. Can you collaboratively not work together? I don't think so, but I think
it's okay. We're not going to worry about redundancy. Nothing is reversed here.
Right. Exactly. But at the end of the day, there is this beautiful relationship that I Was Supposed to Have a Baby has cultivated with the other Jewish fertility organizations, so that we really all work together to try to give people exactly the help that they need. And often, and many times, people go use us for some kind of help. They use someone else for a different kind of help, and someone else for a different kind of help. And I think that that's the most beautiful thing that I couldn't have ever dreamed of. We all know that there are lots of different facets to this journey, and no one of us can do this alone. And so the fact that we have this beautiful working relationship really makes me very happy at the end of the day.
Well, it's a beautiful working relationship, but also a beautiful journey to such a big, supportive, interactive community. Although some, like we just talked about, some people join anonymously just to read and learn. And like you were talking about, in certain circumstances or situations that might be triggering, they have a place to go right in the palm of their hand. So I think that's incredible. And I think you recently had an anniversary, right?
We did. We just had our 2nd year anniversary. And we are very excited. We're looking to bring on a mental health professional coming up sometime in the next couple of months. We're looking for the right fit, but we are going to be expanding and bringing on more programming. And look, we know the people are out there, and we all know that they need support. And so we're looking to help in any way we can.
Amazing. And so I would love to get into some of the questions that I know that you receive often. And they of course apply across other communities as well, but to some extent they can and be specific to the Jewish experience and related to holidays and family interactions as well. And so we were talking about certain triggering events. You know, sometimes you might skip a bris or some kind of gathering just to protect yourself, but you might also end up at another gathering and unexpectedly there's a birth announcement, right? But just in general, you know, what are your suggestions to get through, for example, the holidays or gatherings while trying to conceive? And just what are some of the ways that you suggest and support to people that come to you with this question, which I know is a frequently asked question?
All the time. I think I wouldn't say it's every day, but I would say it's about every other day where I get some sort of question exactly like this. Look, the journey we know is fraught. It's filled with lots of different places and spaces and people that can trigger us and can, you know, try, not that they try, but that can unfortunately, inadvertently, you know, make us feel othered in a way that we know already that we feel, but they add that layer on top of it. And so what I always suggest to people is you have to decide for yourself. Each person or each couple has to decide for themselves what is important and what's important for them to attend and what's not important for them to attend, and what they can sort of sneak back and what they can just not really show up to because it's too much for them to handle emotionally. And so for every person and every couple, that's different, right? For some people, they might feel they have to show up to every personal event and every work event and every this, like everyone has different obligations. And for others, they make a hierarchy. This I need to go to because we're really close and they're family friends for X number of years. And this one, not so much. And this one, like, so I always say to people, you know, if you had a physical illness, a headache, a stomach virus, you know, a broken leg that you couldn't walk, you wouldn't go to certain things.
That's a good point.
Because you couldn't. So this may not be physical, and that's a whole other can of worms, which I'm not going to enter into right now, because we obviously know that infertility is a medical diagnosis. And we know that pregnancy loss is a medical diagnosis. You can't lose a baby because you're thinking bad thoughts, but I'm putting that sort of can of worms aside for the moment.
It's like almost reimagined or redefined as an emotional diagnosis, but really
Correct.
it's both and it's everything intertwined. So it's just
Exactly. Exactly. But these feelings of, I don't want to go because I'm nervous about how I'm going to feel, or these like, or I'm worried that someone's going to say something to me that's going to make me upset. Right. So these feelings are emotional. And so they're just as valid as a physical ailment. And so you can decide to not go. That's option number one. Make that hierarchy. Decide. You don't have to be there. Option number two, have a code word for yourself, or either for yourself and your partner, or for someone else that is, you know, your friend at the event. And when you're starting to feel like you can't take it anymore, you just say the code word. I mean, for some people, it's kicking them under the table, but for other people, maybe it's the word orange. Like my husband and I have used the word orange. Like, those oranges look really great. Really? Oh yeah, I just remembered we have something we need to get to, right? And like, you make a quick exit. So have a code word, or have some sort of signal where the other person knows that you've had enough and you need to leave. And I think sort of that, it brings me to the last piece of this, that even if you do go to an event that you know you need to be at, and you think you're going to be okay, and it's not going to be too much for you, you may end up getting there and just feeling overwhelmed, or there may be something at that, you know, at one specific point that triggers you. Walk out, take a walk, go outside, leave early. Like, there are ways to also show up, but then take time for yourself and space for yourself, and make sure that you're not just, you know, a complete dish rag at the end. So I think that, you know, everyone has a different way of handling different events depending on their importance, but know that even if you go, you still have an out, and make sure that you hold that with you, and you plan your out so that you're not struggling and searching for it at the moment that you feel overwhelmed.
And be kind to yourself about making that decision. You know, tell yourself in advance that it will be okay if you do it. If you just add guilt on top of everything else you're going through, it doesn't help anyone. Absolutely. It only hurts you. It doesn't make anyone feel better that you left. You know, if they care about you enough, they understand anyway, right? So
absolutely.
So do you have suggestions for ways to work together with your partner besides code words and helping each other exit events? But, you know, the emotional journey can be different for partners, and also it can be different related to the reason for infertility, right? Because almost half of, you know, infertility cases are male factor related. So do you have advice or suggestions for partners to get through this journey together and support each other?
Communicate, 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 and therapy, 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 and therapy. You know, the only way to get through this, even when it's not, you know, the blame or the problem isn't with one person or the other. Like, partners go through different emotions. Like, it just, that's just a fact of life. They go through different emotions at different times. And the way to get your needs met is to make sure that you're communicating. And even if your needs are, I need you to leave me alone. Like, you need to communicate. You need to share what you're feeling, because I think, you know, even in 2021, we still do not have the technology to read people's minds. And so you need to tell people how you're feeling, because they can't guess. But also on the flip side, this is really hard. This is really hard stuff. And sometimes you need a third party to tease out the emotions in a safe space, so that you can share with your partner what you need and what you feel and what's going on. And so I'm a huge advocate for therapy. Therapy, 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 therapy. Maybe it's couples therapy, maybe it's individual therapy for you and for your partner, whatever it is. But having a safe space to have these kinds of conversations and discuss this is different than having a friend. And so I'm a very big proponent of communication, 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 but also getting the help you need in a therapeutic and safe way. And so that is therapy.
And therapy helps enable your communication even further, right? It helps.
Absolutely.
They help with techniques for communicating throughout the process. I think it's such a good plan as soon as you know you're going to be going through some kind of infertility or third-party family building journey to set yourself up with therapists. But it can be really helpful to specifically choose one that specializes in or has a lot of experience in infertility or third-party family building journeys, right?
Definitely.
You might already go to a different type of therapist, but might want to consider one that specializes in that area and it's such a specific experience for couples to go through, I think.
Definitely. Look, what I always say is that just because you're going through infertility or just because you have a loss doesn't mean that you need therapy, but it doesn't hurt. And it always helps because it's a safe space with someone who is trained in this area, exactly the way you said. Like I always don't go to just a general therapist, you pick up on Google. Make sure that they have fertility background and fertility training. And that person is already going to understand your language, is already immediately going to know where you're coming from and be able to give you practical and just really pointed tips to help you get through a lot of these different pieces. So you don't need it, but it's always helpful.
They will understand exactly which appointments you're going to and what they mean and what stage they are, how important they are. They'll understand exactly how it feels to go to certain events and be triggered, or to, they will have helped people through those specific experiences so many times before. So
yes,
completely agree. And so also speaking of just fertility providers beyond therapists that specialize in this space, but are there specifics that you look for in doctors or other fertility providers, as you made your decisions? What criteria did you think about and consider, and what do you recommend to others when they're working on kind of making that decision of which doctors and clinics to work with?
I think that I don't personally give medical advice. I was supposed to have a baby. We don't give medical advice. We don't recommend clinics because it just falls out of our purview. But
just the criteria to think about. As far as what's important, or do you look for those that have experience working with parents from the Jewish community, or that come recommended by friends and family, or just what, I know some people care mostly just about success rates, while others care a lot more about their, how it feels to be there, their bedside manner, if it feels inclusive. I'm just curious how you help people think through that.
Right. So in my personal life, I would say professionally, we don't do this at all. But personally, when people come to me, when friends and family come to me, I think it's exactly as you said. Like, everyone has different. It really depends on where they are in the journey and what they're specifically looking for at the time. Some people, when they're first starting, they want a clinic that's local to them. They want someone who's kind. They want someone who's familiar with the Jewish community. And that's sort of like the first stop. If unfortunately they've been unsuccessful and are looking for a second opinion, then they're drilling down more into the facts. What are the success rates? What are the different pieces? We want someone who's very much up on the research and is willing to try new innovative techniques. We're willing to travel. We're willing to do all sorts of things. But I think in general, in the Jewish community, specifically in the Orthodox Jewish community, because so many of these cycles run 7 days a week. They don't run only 6 days a week and don't include the Sabbath. And so for those who keep the Sabbath, it's important that the clinic and the doctor understands that you may not be able to be available for ultrasounds or for blood work on a Saturday or on a holiday. And so what does that mean in terms of your care? Maybe it means that or around certain holidays, So for example, I know many in the Jewish community, like when they discuss this with their doctors, they don't schedule any cycles that happen to coincide with any major Jewish holidays, because it's too hard to really get an accurate depiction of what's going on from a medical standpoint if you're not available for testing. On the flip side, in certain communities, in certain cities around the globe, one of the other Jewish fertility organizations called Aimee, they actually, if you only need blood work on a Saturday, they actually can send someone to your house. I know, because I had this done for me personally. They can send someone to your house to just draw blood work for you. And then that blood work is brought back to the doctor's office, and you get a call, Saturday evening, and they tell you what to do the next day or that night, what meds to take. And so as long as the doctors are flexible and understand what your circumstance are, and depending on where you live geographically, there's lots that can be done that can work around the calendar, but you need to find someone who, understands this and is willing to work with you.
That's so interesting to know. I would guess that some people would never know that a doctor would be able to work with them in such a specific way. So,
yes.
And so another thing you talked about was which I think is so just thoughtful and considerate, that you have such a big community of people that come to you that aren't dealing with infertility. They might be a friend or family member of someone who is, and they come for support and advice about how to, for example, break the news if they're having a baby. And, at some point you need to tell your friend that, who you can tell, maybe they've told you, or you can just tell they're struggling to build their family. So what do you tell them about, kind of, for that specific case? We'll start with that. I know that's a common question. How do you kind of soften the blow and break the news to someone that will probably be upset about this?
Yeah.
Not they'll be happy for you, of course, they'll do their best, but.
Right. Right. This is definitely you hit right on it. This is definitely the most common question I get. I feel like I need to make a big sign and sort of like send it out, everywhere, because I'm answering this question constantly.
Well, I can imagine it's so common, obviously, in communities that people have a lot of children if they can. You're consistently telling your friends and family that you're having children if you are, and
correct.
You can tell if someone else is struggling. So
correct. So I think, what I always advise people is that it's exactly what you said. It's I'm happy for you, but I'm sad for me. And that's the emotion that's evoked whenever this kind of scenario comes up. And so that natural emotion of like, oh, wow, that's really great. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm dealing with this again. Right. The natural emotion of feeling distraught, of feeling crushed, of feeling like you're being left behind again, is one that automatically comes up the minute you hear this news. It's not as if like you spend 5 minutes in the happy space and you spend 5 minutes in the, now I'm really upset. Like it comes up simultaneously. And so the problem is that when people give you news like this, they expect you to be all happy for them and like, hey, I just shared all this great news for you. And like, yeah, I get that it's hard for you, but like, and when you show them those natural emotions of like, it's complicated and I'm really not like, of course, like happy, but like, actually, I just want to go cry in the corner. People don't really understand that. And so what I always suggest is to share news like this in an informal not informal, but in a removed way. So like in text or by email, because if you do it in person, you're not giving anyone the chance to have that natural emotion. And instead they're putting on their fake face and their fake smile. And instead they're dying inside and they actually just want to go to that corner and cry. And they still have to spend an entire meal or a coffee date or some sort of interaction and pretend that they're happy with you and happy for you. If you send it by text or if you send it by email, the person opens that text or email on their own time, in their own terms. They're allowed to have their natural reaction on their own time, in their own terms, without an audience, and then can come back to you when they're ready and they've gotten all that like yucky stuff out and they were like, hey, I'm so happy for you. That's great. And so I always suggest to do it in a removed way because you don't want to put people in a position where they're feeling uncomfortable or feeling like they just want to leave. You want them to be able to have their natural emotions. And so it's much better to do it in that way.
And especially given that it's not only not in person, but it's not in a group setting,
exactly.
Right? When they get a text.
Yes.
And so I know another question that people have is, you know, if you know that someone's struggling or having a hard time starting their family, getting pregnant, or have experienced a loss, just what can you do to help and comfort them without, you know, saying the wrong thing? I think people who haven't gone through infertility, they don't know what the exact mindset or experience feels like. They can get worried that they will say the wrong thing, which could make them freeze up and not say anything. And so how do you help advise them when they come to you with this question?
Yeah, it's, I think the important tenet and the important takeaway for this specifically is your job and your role is to be supportive. So if you know, I think there are two pieces. If you know that someone is struggling or if you think someone might be struggling, right? So if you know someone is struggling, your role as a friend or as a family member is to be supportive. Your role is to not give advice, to not give medical thoughts, to not tell them other suggestions of what you think they might be doing or should be doing.
You're going to get it wrong. Don't tell them to relax. Don't, just
Don't give them,
don't tell them what worked for your cousin.
Correct. Don't give them any sort of advice at all. And also the platitudes of like, oh, it's okay. Like it only happens to people who are strong and like everything happens for a reason, or like, don't worry, things will be fine soon. Like these are platitudes that people say that actually have basically no meaning and often are just very hurtful because no one really knows what the future holds. And you don't know why. None of us know why things happen and none of us know what the future will bring. And so the real takeaway here is your role is to be supportive. Let them talk to you, let them cry with you, bring them food, bring them fuzzy socks, bring them warm soup, bring them like deliciously scented candles, bring them like, just do things for them that you know that they would enjoy. Take them places if they're willing to go. Places that they love, bring them out in nature, get them things to distract themselves. Like your job is to play the supportive friend, not the doctor, therapist, advice columnist, you know, any of these other people. Your job is just effectively to be there for hugs. And so if you think that your actions or your words can be extrapolated into a hug, if it connotes in your mind that it's a hug, you're doing it right. If you think that it's metaphor, like not really a hug, that the other person wouldn't perceive it as being a hug, then I would hold back from it. And so that's really the best way to support someone if you know. If you don't know, but you think, you suspect, you maybe, then it's not your job again to give advice on what you suspect or what you might know or what you think. It's again, your job to just sort of dangle out there like, hey, I just wanted to let you know I'm here if you ever want to talk. Or, hey, I like found that thing. Do you remember you told me you really like pumpkin spiced stuff? Like, I saw this candle, and I'm back to candles again. I saw this thing and I got it for you and I'm dropping it off at your door. Like, I just thought you might like it. It's like, it's just little things like that. It's really just when you might suspect that anyone's going through a hard time, no matter what it is. It doesn't have to be infertility or loss. It could be really anything. If you found out maybe through the grapevine, someone might have lost their job, or you found out, God forbid, someone has like got a cancer diagnosis or whatever it is, like you would just do something, or you would drop off something just because you're caring about them. You care about them. Mm-hmm. You could just send a text. Hey, I just wanted to say hi. I'm thinking about you. Like these small little, like, I call them sort of like love notes, so to speak. Like you're just dropping them in. You're just dropping them in and letting the other person know that you care. Mm-hmm. And if they're ready to talk, they will. If they won't, nothing was harmed. You just let them know that you cared.
I love to think about it in the sense of if your words would equate to a hug. Again, I think that's perfect. But also what you said about equating it to almost like if someone had a cancer diagnosis or something else like that, you wouldn't say everything happens for a reason. You would find a way to stop yourself, even if that's something that you automatically say sometimes. And I think that's one of the ones that really hurts people. But I also think sometimes people say it because they get nervous and they don't maybe seek advice in advance or think thoughtfully in advance about what to say to the person. So it's good that people are coming to you to ask for that help and then are being really considerate about what they plan to say or what not to say.
I'm always so grateful. I love when people ask for advice because it means that they're thinking. Mm-hmm. It means that they want to do the right thing and they're thinking, and I love it. I love it.
On that note, are there questions also not to ask that could come off as a little bit too, pointed, some question that people might not want to be put in a position where they have to answer certain questions. And I think sometimes people think that to help someone get talking, they ask certain questions, right? Or if they just get nervous, they turn to that. So is it that you just shouldn't ask any questions, or are there certain specific questions that you should try not to ask to someone who's potentially opening up to you about what they're going through?
Look, I think that if a person is opening up, then you let them lead. Mm-hmm. You like, if you see that they're struggling over something, or if you see that something is like, it seems like they might want to talk more about it, you can gently prod them and say, if there's anything more you want to talk about, I'm here for you. But it's really up to the other person to lead and to share with you what they want. I always say, don't ask anything like, oh, what did that doctor say? Or what did this doctor say? Or did you get a second opinion? Or what do you think about that? Like, they're sharing with you because they want a safe space to share. Mm-hmm. Let them share. Let them share, and don't push them into anything more than what they want. You're just the receptacle of really what they need to get out. And so I always say, just, try not to ask any questions. I will say though, just in terms of asking questions and questions not to ask, generally speaking, when like the one question that people constantly ask when you're meeting somebody new, or when you're in some sort of a new setting, or you're standing around at a bar mitzvah or at a wedding or at some social event, right? Whenever you're meeting someone new, it's this constant like, hey, how are you? Oh, where are you from? What's your name? Oh, are you married? How many kids do you have? Right?
And how old are they? And
how old are they? And so what I always try to educate people about is to not ask these sort of detailed demographic questions of, are you married? And how many kids do you have? Because those are really personal questions that can be extremely triggering for people who are, of all different kinds of people who are married, who are not married, who are in same-sex relationships, who are in heterosexual relationships, who are not interested in getting married at all and still having relationships, people who have kids, people who don't have kids, widowed, divorced, I mean, we could go on and on and on and on, right? And so these kinds of questions are really triggering. What I educate people and I share with them is a better way to sort of gently pry, and what you really wanting to know a little bit more about the other person. And these are innocuous questions, but they often are very triggering.
They feel like they are in so many cases, but of course, to those that have struggled or don't have children, they're the worst question that you're always hoping not to get. And then,
Correct.
in so many other cases, people might be excited to get asked that question.
Correct.
Those people, though, if you don't ask them, they'll probably find a way to tell you about their kids, right?
Exactly. But so what I always suggest is something that I learned actually when I was working with Nechama Comfort. A better thing to ask is, so tell me a little bit about yourself, or tell me about your family, right? So that either way, the onus is on the person to share what they want to share, as opposed to what you're asking them to share. And so they could like tell you about their family. They could tell you about their 4 kids. They might want to tell you about the fact that they're divorced. They might want to tell you about their child who died, 2 summers ago, or they might not. And they might just want to tell you about their dog. So,
that's a valid family member, in my opinion.
Right.
We had our dog before our kids and before some of our struggles, and the dog has been there the longest. And last place in the order of importance, but definitely the first chronologically, and
Exactly.
So
and so
I've been there when all I had to say was that I had a dog.
Right. But nobody would know about your dog unless they were given the opportunity. They gave you the opportunity, and they said, well, tell me a little bit about yourself, or tell me about your family. And people, before you had kids, and for so many people, their pets are their life, and they consider them to be part of their family. And so to immediately sort of jump to, well, are you married, or how many children do you have, immediately puts people on edge. So to flip around and change the conversation and put the onus on the other person and say, tell me about, is just a gentler, kinder way of asking these kinds of questions.
That's such a good way to rephrase it. Thank you for that. I think that's really helpful. So last, I know you mentioned, specifically with your journey, there was a point where you were going back and forth between maybe giving up or taking a break, or, figuring out what you could manage, but you knew that you had to take a break at the very least, right? So I believe from our prior discussions that you get asked about this a lot. So I think it's something that would be helpful for intended parents going through this process to understand. How do you help people understand when they come to you asking about this, like when it's time to take a break or to consider trying a different path, things like that? You're at that fork in the road and they come to you with that question for your thoughts.
Look, I think that when people are coming and asking about that, it means that they've already started to consider it. And
it's not like you're planting the idea in their head, right?
Correct. They're open already to the idea because they've been through a lot and they don't know how much more they can handle. And so the way I answered it for myself, and this is what I always share it with people, is that for me, and again, I had 3 kids at the time, and I had 4 failed pregnancies in the second trimester. At that moment in time, the fear that I had that I was going to have another failed pregnancy was greater than my desire to have another child. And at that point, I literally just could not even think about trying again because I was so broken in so many ways. And I needed to stop. And every other pregnancy before then, all those other 4, it was, okay, fine. It happened. Next time will be better. Let's go. It happened. Let's go. it happened. Let's go. I got to that point and I was like, oh, like, this is just not good. I am not in a good place. And I couldn't even see even a day forward of how I was going to move forward. I was in a very, very deep and dark place. And that was when I knew I needed to stop.
Mm-hmm.
As time went on and I healed a little bit emotionally and physically, that ratio changed. And I said to myself, it's not that I'm not scared of losing another baby, because I'm still petrified. And a whole other conversation is, how do you deal with pregnancy after loss? And, you know, that's a, you know, another conversation. But at that point, I said, I have enough emotional and physical fortitude that I know that if I had another loss at this point, I knew that I could see my way out of it. And so I'm willing to put myself through it again to try.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for every person, that ratio is different. And it also happens at different points in the journey. You have to constantly evaluate, what's the end goal? What are you willing to put yourself through in order to get there? Can you handle the emotional fallout if it doesn't happen? And then what does that look like if it doesn't happen? And how long is it going to take for you to get back to baseline?
Mm-hmm.
And so for every person, it's different. But that's what I always share with them. I ask them to consider both of those pieces and then make a decision about whether you're ready to move forward or whether you're ready to stop.
And you don't have to feel like you should move forwards if you're not ready.
Right.
I personally, after going through, I had a pregnancy that almost all fell apart a little before 8 months, and spent a month in the NICU and going through just that fear and that day in and day out experience. It's such a specific thing also to go through being a NICU parent, as well as it's, you know, so specific to go through any different type of infertility. And I didn't think I could ever go through it again. And something just started to hit, you know, a couple of years later, where I then had this shift where instead of being so scared of going through that again, or possibly losing a pregnancy again, or having to tell my children that they were having a sibling and then have to take that back, all those things that you're so scared of, my mindset just suddenly started to shift to being afraid that I couldn't have another child. And I really wanted to, and maybe I was getting too old, or definitely I was too high risk. But that shift to, I'm more afraid of not having, like, I want to have this child. And that is such a bigger emotion than the fear from before, having had a long time to process it. It becomes really clear to you, I think. Right. And so it's understandable that you're saying, if someone comes to you asking that question, they've already clearly started to think about it. It wouldn't be out of just nowhere that you're giving them advice about stopping or changing courses if they haven't already thought about it themselves.
Right.
Yeah. And so thank you for that. And on a final note, can you share, this is something we like to ask everyone that, you know, has expertise in this fertility space or has been through it themselves as well and come out on the other side. Do you have any just words of wisdom, advice, inspiration, or even like a personal mantra or quote that you like that helped you get through it that you could pass along to intended parents just beginning this journey?
Yeah. So I don't ever say, keep going, keep trying, stay strong, everything's going to be fine. Like, I don't ever say things like that.
Mm-hmm.
What I do say is, no one can predict the future, and no one can tell you whether you're going to have a baby in your arms or not.
Mm-hmm.
But what I can tell you is that along the journey, and while you're going through all of the swirling emotions, there is a community of people who can be there for you and hold your hand every step of the way, whether it ends up in a baby in your arms or whether it comes to a dead end. Mm-hmm. There are people out there who get it and who understand and can help you through it. And so that's the piece that I like to give to people. This community, the I was supposed to have a baby community, the general social media community of people who are dealing with fertility challenges, your community, there are people out there who get it. And so we are here, and we are able to hold your hand and help you all the way through. So that should give, to try to hold on to that and know that you're very much not alone.
Exactly. I think feeling alone on top of everything else you're going to is such a common feeling, and you don't have to feel that. And when you talk to women that went through their infertility journey several years ago, it was so different. I think it was talked about much less. There weren't these social media communities of support where literally people from around the world going through this together will come and support each other. They'll know what to say if other people in your life don't. Yes. Right. And you're not alone, and you don't have to be alone if you choose not to be.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for that. And lastly, just remind us where we can find you. It's at I was supposed to have a baby, right?
Yes.
And anything coming up that you're excited about, just related to the account or professionally that people can look out for?
Yeah, we have lots of lives with medical professionals and other support professionals in the field that are coming up in the next number of months. And we always have our 4 monthly support groups that we offer that are all always free. One for infertility, one for pregnancy loss, one for anyone who's dealing with or thinking about IVF for genetic reasons, and another one for anyone who's dealing with, thinking about, or has gone through egg donation, sperm donation, or embryo donation. So those are our standing programs, and we have lots more things coming up, but some things I can't share yet. So you'll have to tune in and see.
Yeah. I think, our founder will be on there. He went through he's in the LGBTQ plus community, but also Jewish and Israeli, and we'll be sharing his egg donation and surrogacy journey and, advice for intended parents going through something similar. And
we're all very excited to have him.
I think it's interesting too, because whether he lived in Israel at the time or in New York at the time where he did, his surrogacy journey and compensated surrogacy was illegal, right? Even in New York, he had to go out of state. So it's just, so much needs to change, but I think you're one of many that are helping bring awareness and support and helping in all of us in our small way to bring on change and to bring on more understanding and awareness of what people are going through to build their families. And so, thank you again for just everything you shared today and for everything you do every day for this community. And also for helping support friends and family of those going through infertility, even though those friends and family aren't doing so themselves, it's so helpful for them to have a resource to go to just understand how to be supportive in a productive way and in a sensitive way. It's just specific advice that can be so helpful just to not say the one wrong thing to trigger someone. So
thank you.
And congrats again on the anniversary and, all the growth and everything coming up.
Thank you so much. It was really an honor. Thank you.